Hi, and welcome. This is a series where we're bringing together different people from walks of life where they're all passionate about children, they're passionate about parenting, about caregivers. This is a series put together for you by Soul Katha. It's called The Aware Parent, but it's really for anybody. It's for teachers, caregivers, grandparents, parents, anyone who's interested in children, likes to work with them, and wants to work on themselves, because this is a space for conscious living and it always begins with us. I'm so very delighted to have Kesang here because, hi, Kesang.
Hi, my name actually is Kesang.
Ah, that's good to know. I've been trying different versions of your name in my head. And right, Kesang. Thank you for correcting me. So we welcome Kesang again. This is one of the most beautiful things about India. We just can't even figure out each other's names, right?
Yeah, so multicultural.
So I welcome Kesang. And one of the reasons that I think she's amazing and relevant is because when when I read about her and her story and whatever little I've heard, is that she's driven, ambitious, and she passed out of Tata School of Social Sciences and she says, hey, I'm going to change the world. And she went on to work in rural development and suddenly found herself pregnant and said, huh. She found herself with this baby and she found the weight of her responsibility. And then you look at this young mom who's actually taken all this drive, zest, and zeal for life and who's put it on this baby. And when she's done that, nobody in her world understands the why and how of it. And since then, I think she's tried to reinvent the wheel of trying to say, my experience as a mother and your experience as a mother or a parent is the most important role that you play, and bringing value to that. So she started Parenting Matters about 15 years ago to bring alive the fact that this is the toughest, most important role that we play in society. And I think that that's the thing I like most about her is that she continues to stay passionate, she continues to stay relevant and driven. And that's why we have her here to talk about what are your triggers? What are your triggers when you're with your child, when you're with yourself, when you're with the environment? And I think maybe I'll leave the floor open to Kesang. Am I saying it right now?
Kesang.
Kesang. What does it mean, Kesang?
Actually, it's a Bhutanese name because my parents were posted to Bhutan when I was born. Prosperity.
Oh, beautiful. Lovely.
Yeah.
So could you just start with some opening words and then we could probably dwell deeper into, triggers and things like that? Because I think that people already who are watching are like, what is a trigger?
Definitely. So thank you, Karishma, so much for having me here. I'm always thrilled to have the opportunity to share my passion for parenting with anyone and kind of really talk about how important this job is and how every one of us, it's so valuable when we can invest and enjoy this journey and really give our children what they need to grow to their full potential. I know that's a very cliched term, full potential, but just be who they need to be.
Yeah.
And when you asked me to do this interview, I was very keen on sharing with you because you were asking me what's very alive for me at this point of time. And what's really alive for me is that I am undergoing a training along with the whole Parenting Matters team with a very well-known parent educator and speaker, worldwide international speaker called Robin Grill. And he's written many books on parenting, but the most recent one, which is inspiring the course we're doing, it's called Inner Child Journeys, How Children Grow Us Up.
Wow. Okay.
how actually our children are these amazing opportunities for us to look within and examine ourselves and work on things that, we may not realize even exist in there. He's been teaching us, we're still in the middle of this course, he's been teaching us how this inner child, really understanding what has happened in your life, your experience. Doesn't have to be only child. It could be in a toddler, in an adolescent, in a young adult. Like all the experiences you have in your life, they are literally wired into the biology of your body, which neuroscience is able to prove today and show us that every experience, you may not have a memory of it, but every experience is there. And we have no idea how it affects our reactions.
Wow. I think this is something that would actually help everyone. If we lend perspective that, you know what, I don't know what's going on with me and I don't know what is triggering me and I don't know why I behave the way I behave. That in itself can be liberating for so many people to hear, right?
Yeah. But like you said, many people say, like, what is a trigger?
Yes.
So I would like to kind of explain it that, you have a situation in front of you. Maybe your child refuses to eat his food, or maybe, he's always, you feel like he or she is not listening to you, or you have a situation where they've made a huge mess of the house. I mean, anything, or your teenager is rude to you or slams the door. So we all have these situations happening, and everything cannot be linked to the past. But sometimes there are these situations where the emotion that rises in you is kind of really far more or disproportionate to the situation in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of feel so angry or so hurt or so upset about something. And sometimes you see this happening in a repetitive pattern. Every time my child does this, I feel so angry or upset about it.
Mm.
And what we're uncovering now is that many of these things could have literally nothing to do with actually what is happening in front of you. Because what is rising within you, like, for example, if your child is, you put a lovely meal on the table and the child says, I don't want to eat this today. And of course, anyone would be upset. But if you find yourself very upset about it, it could be that the rejection is really to do with a rejection that you faced much earlier in your life. And that hurt and that pain that you're carrying is making you feel so utterly. I mean, you're not just looking at it like, okay, there's a toddler who doesn't want to eat his veggies today, but it's emotional for you. Or for example, if your child is loud or raises their voice. I mean, many parents share this, that because I grew up in a house where my parents were always fighting, the moment my child's voice goes louder, I'm taken back. I mean, if you're aware, you realize you're taken back to that earlier situation. And so your reactions are like either you shut down or something happens within you and you can't bear just that boisterous child who's just being themselves, but it does something to you. So that's what I would call a trigger.
It's really interesting that you say that the trigger can be different. So the child is doing what the child is doing. And there could be 10 annoying things, but only maybe one or two of those annoying things will actually annoy you, right?
Exactly.
And that disproportionate reaction is what we call a trigger. So how do we bring more awareness to that? Like, how do parents sort of hone in and identify with perhaps some empathy, right?
Yeah.
And say, hey, so now we know what is a trigger. Now, can you help us move to how to identify that trigger?
So first, I'd like to ask you, when you're hearing this, does it make sense to you? Do you immediately think about it and say, yeah, I mean, if my child doesn't upset me, but there is some things that absolutely do.
Yes, absolutely. Something that's perfectly amazing and normal to her will make me uncomfortable. Or someone will say something about her and she's so, and the adjective, whatever that is. And it could even be pretty, that word could trigger something, or it could be naughty or whatever it is. And that word could trigger something in me because somebody might have called me that. Say, oh, why are you identifying her only as pretty? Why are you identifying him only as naughty? Right? She's bigger and better than that. Right? Or, and definitely there's a trigger and is not proportionate to what you're saying is normal. Because we all feel feelings of hurt, sadness, anger. But it could be that much, and it's that much because of our emotional selves. We don't remember the why of it, right? So I think you're
Exactly.
bang on, Kesang. It's just
Like that word naughty could kind of really take you back to when you were shamed and you were made to feel like, why are you like this? Why don't you listen? And you were punished for being naughty. And then, that word naughty could just,
yeah.
and sometimes if we are not aware, we do the exact same thing to our children.
Mm.
So when your child is being naughty,
Mm-hmm.
if you have been punished and shamed for being naughty, you might actually do exactly the same thing because you're like, this is not the way to be. And you're even thinking that, if you continue to be naughty, you are going to be shamed the way I was shamed. So you need to stop that.
I need to protect them.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, I mean, when you ask, how do you identify, it's like, once I could say that, my kids are now 19 and 23. And to be honest, I have a lot of regrets that I have stumbled on this journey so late. It's simply like, now I'm like, oh my God, now I know. And why did I do this? Why was there certain parts of my children that I just could not accept?
Mm.
Where was this coming from, And like, so I kind of wish I had more awareness. So I think anyway, whatever age your kids are, and this is not just true of your children, it's true of any interaction, your husband, your spouse, your parents, your neighbors, your friends. When you find that something really upsets you, to kind of ask yourself, is this to do with the situation in front of me? Or is this to do with my past? And there are many things that really the situation warrants you getting upset, but there are many things that you're like so upset about, and it's way beyond what that situation demands.
Mm.
And it's interesting, sometimes we overreact and sometimes we underreact. So by underreacting, I mean that if somebody is behaving, your child or anyone's behaving in a way that is triggering something in you, you might just freeze. You might just go into your room. You might just choose not to engage. So that also is a signal that you're getting triggered.
Triggered, yes. Mm. So essentially, what you're saying is the disproportionate reaction could be either ends of the spectrum. And we just have to basically watch ourselves and see how we react to that.
Yeah.
And the most important point, I think, is also thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable about your own journey with your children. Because I think when people are watching this, they think, oh, my children are old now. It won't make a difference. But I think just the awareness of a mother sitting here and accepting what could have been is very, very powerful for children to hear every step of the way. And there's always scope, I think, right up till the last breath to sort of keep growing and learning and evolving. And I think that's the journey, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's just amazing. When we talk about this, I feel like some parents were like, oh, we come across so soft if we just always accept them for who they are. And children are so manipulative, they'll just take us for a ride. What do you have to say for parents, who struggle with that sort of conditioning, that we have to discipline them and we have to give them instructions and we can't just accept anything that they're doing? you know?
When you say that, I get triggered. I've been in this work for the last 16 years. Every time a parent says, no, my child is going to manipulate me, I get triggered. It's like, because I mean, children are really, they're just being children.
Yes.
We are so conditioned to say, all these sayings, if you give an inch, they'll take a yard. Even when that baby is born, you're like, no, don't carry her so much, because, if she gets used to being carried, she won't allow you to put her down. And this is just a baby out of the womb who's used to that closeness and warmth and needs it. So I think children are just signaling their needs. Of course, there are situations where, okay, mom says no to ice cream. I go and ask my dad because I know my dad is going to get it. But wouldn't you do that if you could?
Totally, I would. Yes. Yeah.
Every child is basically struggling to have their needs met. And for every behavior, even when someone says, oh, that's attention seeking, I think the thing to ask ourselves, but then why does the child feel that need for attention? What is beneath that attention? Is the attention because I'm not feeling heard, I'm not feeling understood? There's a reason for that. So truly, and I can share that all the parents who come to our workshops, they do tell us that I never realized that actually meeting the needs of my children and having their cup full, it's like if the cup is full, that I'm allowed to meet my own needs, there's less of that always demanding, always struggling, always like, why don't you get what I need? So-called manipulation comes from a space of not really having their needs met.
So essentially what I understand, Kesang, is that children are survivors, just like we are. So what we could possibly view, or people say, oh, they're playing us, is actually them just surviving.
Yes.
And when you say that, when you really understand them and you accept them for who they are, and they feel fulfilled, then your job is that much easier. So that constant tangle and fight and conflict doesn't exist, because they're like, hey, you understand me, and your needs are met and you're together, as opposed to constantly being at warheads, which is fantastic, because then the next thing comes to, I'm sure people who are watching like, okay, how can I get there? How can we get to this place where we're not constantly having these arguments and there's no tussle? Like, hey, come for lunch isn't a half an hour dramatic, display of emotions. Like, it often is, but how could we bring it to, once a week as opposed to every day or something like that?
So, like we've been doing parenting workshops and working with parents for the last 15, 16 years. And I would say there's huge value to the huge number of, like I said, the raising a child is literally, I believe, the most important thing we do in our lives. And the children we raise are the society that we are creating. And we just don't, every job in the world, whether you're a cleaner or a peon or a bank manager or every job in the world you're trained for. Yeah. And for this job, people think, oh, I'm just, you can just do it by instinct. Reality is, what is that instinct? Of course, we have that instinct of wanting to hold a baby when they cry, and there are certain instincts, but very often what we are calling instinct is really the patterns that we have seen over the years. That, if a child doesn't listen, give him one whack. Or if my child doesn't listen, I have not seen anything else. So how will I know what to do? Know how to call that child for their meal in a way that the child feels like cooperating with me. And this can be learned. So there are so many tools that I really would invite every parent to, read, attend workshops, listen to talks. There's so many resources out there, but we can learn how to enjoy this journey and have our children's cooperation and do the communication in a way that they feel like, responding to us. But at the same time, what I want to tell you is the place where I am right now is that even with all the tools, even with all those tools in the box, there are times when you get triggered. And then you know about communication, you know about how to regulate your feelings, you know about how to help your child regulate their feelings. These are all things that can be learned. But then there are times when it just all doesn't work and you don't know why. So that's where I would talk about then coming back to the journey of unpacking that for yourself, understanding your inner child.
And this is a really difficult thing to do for a lot of people because it's sitting with your emotions, it's sitting with your own ghosts from the past. And it's difficult, it's challenging, and there's no motivation. You're like, why should I sit there and cry my fears out or write about my fears? Or you literally want your head feels like exploding because you can't take the pain of the past. Why should anyone do that? Why do you think it's worth it?
So I very much thought that exactly what you thought, that there's so many wounds that maybe we don't want to, or painful memories that we don't want to go there. And it was such an enlightening experience to be training with Robin Grill, where he kind of gave us this analogy that there's a lake and you don't have to deep dive into the lake. You don't have to go and relive all that, that what happened. My teacher called me up in front of the class and slapped me, or when I was born, my parents didn't want a girl child. And, they are all these things that, or, my parents were in conflict with each other, so they didn't have the time to attend to me. So you don't have to relive these things. You can just go to the lake and put your toes in, just that little bit. Just like when you're in that moment where you're getting triggered, you say like, why is this upsetting me so much? Am I stuck in this pattern with my child? Why is this happening again and again and again? With that and say, what was it like for me when I was that age? So that's one thing that would give us some hints or some clues. The other question, which I've already said, is to say, is this got to do with my own story? And then and that emotion which is coming up in you, for example, if my child is not listening and I'm feeling helpless, I could ask myself, when did this emotion first come up in my life? And when you go back, you might discover that, there was the time in your life where you felt helpless for whatever reasons. You weren't given a choice. Like one parent shared that my parents found it hard to take care of me, and so they sent me to my grandparents, and I had no choice, and I felt helpless. And that helplessness continues. So now also when there's a situation that makes me feel helpless, I've got that, that heart is racing. You don't have to go there. You don't have to actually relive those moments. But if you can get a glimpse, just put your toes into the lake. Just put your feet into the lake. Just that much which is comfortable for you. And you get a glimpse of what is triggering you. Like, I'll give you an example of my own. Recent with grown-up children, with this pandemic, we're all paranoid about, the getting corona and how to stay safe and everything. And after a few months, it was becoming too much for my children. Both the 19-year and 23-year-old have come home. We really want to meet at least one or two friends who we consider safe. And so they started having one or two friends over. And I told them, no, when your friends come, even if they're here for 4 hours, you have to wear the mask. And I found that somehow they were letting down their guard, and they were not always wearing the mask or just calling somebody over without being sure. And I suddenly had a complete meltdown one day and started crying. And I started saying, you guys are okay. It's fine for you. You all are young. You will get, but do you even care what happens to me? And my husband has not been at home. He's gone to see his mother. So it was all about me. I said, do you even care what happens to me? And okay, if I'm dead and gone, fine, you deal with the consequences. You're like getting dramatic about the whole thing. And I was so shocked. They're just looking at me like, what is happening to you? And then I sat, and then, as I was talking to them, I started saying, you know what? I think this has a lot to do with my own self, the way I know I want you guys to be careful. Like, because it's a trigger, that doesn't mean you don't set boundaries for your children. Just because I'm getting triggered doesn't mean I'm going to tell them, no, it's fine. You don't call everybody over. You don't wear masks. But can I communicate this? And I realized the trigger was that I lost my mother when I was less than 3 years old. And I had to fend for myself in the sense that all the adults were so deep in their grief that, as a child, I had to grow up. I had to grow up. I had to not express myself because I could see how much they were grieving, and I had to kind of watch out for myself. So when my children were not, and so the thing that I have to always look out for myself. From that age, from the time I was 3, I had to look out for myself. Even now, I have to look out for myself. Is anyone going to take care of me? Mm. So that feeling that was coming from there. Today, that I apologized to my children and I could be present and I could have a much more reasonable conversation about what safety measures I would want for them. And the steps that Robin Grill gives us, he's like, understand the trigger, go back, try to get a glimpse. Where did this start? Where did this begin for me? Then ask yourself, and what would that child have wished for? That 3-year-old or 5-year-old or newborn baby have wished for. Like in my situation, I would have wished for someone to take care of me. I would have wished for someone to protect me. And then he says that's when you understand that your development was arrested. Stopped there. What you needed to have got, what you deserved to have got as a child, you didn't get. With all compassion for the adults who probably were going through their own story. And this is true of every home, not just mine. The adults are going through their own stories, and that's why they take decisions. Like the adult who may have sent a child away to the grandmother's house. So, but the fact is, you deserved to have got that. Yeah. And if you understand that this was a developmental need of yours, which could not be met, now what is that developmental nutrient that you can give yourself in an adult way? That thing that child in you is still longing for. So in my case, I had a conversation with my husband and I was sharing with him this whole story. And I said to him, that's why I so much need to feel protected and looked after. And so when I get upset, I want you to understand that. And so, one is to ask to express and get your need met even at this stage. Like as we work with parents or as stories have come up about somebody who maybe was asked to take responsibility all the time, being the eldest sibling, always asked to take responsibility for the younger sibling. And so that person even now is getting overwhelmed because she's always taking responsibility. So the nutrient she needs is the ability to be able to say, no, I'm not going to be able to, I'm not doing this. I cannot do it. So you can even think about how do you want to feed yourself that nutrient, not that you always depend on others. Yeah. What can I do for me? So I'm thinking about that. What can I do to nourish myself so that I don't feel the sense of I didn't get that when I was a child.
No, that's really touching, Kesang. It's really beautiful to hear. No, because it's just how a story plays out and it's sort of cyclical. Something happens and then it plays up again with our children. And I think that for most people, it would have stopped at the meltdown, but it's pushing past that. For everyone watching, it's about, hey, how can I get better? How can I do this better? And it's sitting down with yourself, identifying, because it couldn't have been easy for you as a child. Even speaking about it now is not easy. So, it's being brave enough to admit that for ourselves and then communicating that in a positive way, which you've done beautifully with your kids, with your husband, to say, this is what I need. Can that need be met? Can I do it for myself? Enable that nutrient, which is so beautifully put by Robin Grill, right? You said, enable that nutrient to come back into me and nourish me. I think that if anything that is possible, I think that what is the trigger to how can I resolve it? Literally, you've brought it so beautifully together. You've woven it all up so beautifully for everyone to understand. And I'm really grateful for that, Kesang. Um, if you have one thing to say to people who are listening, what would that be? Because I think we're running out of time, but yeah, it's just flown by. So anything that you have to share that, that you think will change their life, would think that, you know what, this is worth it at the end of the day, because I had that conversation with my children and they understood me, I understand them. And I guess you're in a greater place of empathy and connection because of it, right? So something that could, help others. I think you've already done so much. I also want to quickly say that I think that because of your lack of presence of what you needed, you have been there for so many mothers in a way that, has enabled them, and you've not let the children feel like their mothers are not present, because it happens so many times. The mother's there, but she's not fully present for the child because of her own triggers and her own inner story, right? And you've enabled that. So, it's such a crazy journey. So I'm
Thank you
happy.
for that, Karishma. But let me tell you, it's never rosy. Parenting is hard. It's messy. It's tough. And even if you're a parent educator, you are all the time making your own mistakes. I made so many mistakes of my own, and it's just there's a joy in that process of being with other parents and saying, "Hey, let's discover this." And really, when as far as the what makes it worth it for the inner child work, it's just that there are times when you get so stuck and you will never know it. You will never know why there are parts of your children you cannot accept, and that really happened to me. And I didn't know why there were certain things that just I couldn't. And then you're leaving this child feeling I'm not good enough because you're blaming them. You're blaming them for being difficult, for being naughty, for being, so when you finally start looking within, it's like the lens clears. And then you're able to see them for who they are, able to really see how much of it was their responsibility. And like I said, we don't take everything on ourselves. So how much of it is their responsibility? How much of it is mine? Can I take ownership for that? And then, then the children grow up with the sense of, not having to carry your baggage. So, for example, if I was made to feel inadequate because I didn't get good marks in school, for example, and then that becomes so big for me. And then, I'm so fearful that, my child should get those marks. So always making your children feel they can't live up. So the beauty is, can we try, I'm not saying it's easy, to celebrate the child that's really in front of us rather than this image? Because, we parent from, this is all these goals and this is what my child needs to be. And so when you have all these goals and they have this image, your child is always like, when am I going to live up to all this? When am I not going to be naughty? When am I going to be able to make my parents happy? When can I be what they want me to be? And that's not the kind of individuals we really want in this world. Because, like the very last thing I'd like to say is I truly believe that the anger, the violence, the kind of things that we see, the hate we see in society, it really, a large part of it comes from the way you're raised, the way that I believe if a child has received compassion, understand, we're going to get a lot of things wrong, that's okay. But basically, if a child has received compassion, has grown up in an environment where without physical or emotional violence, I call it, in terms of, we can be so violent with our words. Yes. Grow up in that kind of an environment. I really believe that what they bring and what kind of world those kids are going to create is going to be different.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's really lovely to hear. I think that you've left us with a lot of food for thought and hopefully with lots of nutrients to feed ourselves. I hope everyone has enjoyed listening to Kesang as much as I have because every little thing connects the dots. And I think that, you have to embrace that and stay with accepting yourself and your child for a brighter, happier tomorrow. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much, Kasang, for being here, for joining us, and to taking the
I
time.
really enjoyed the conversation and for giving me
Me
this
too.
chance to share with you.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Shine brighter with Soul Katha. That's normally what we end with. Shine. Right. Take
Lovely.
care,
Thank
Kasang.
you, Karishma.
So much. Bye.
Bye.